Dr. Sarah, we need to be careful with any information in this room. It's top secret. We need to get him to Area 51 urgently.
The first thing you notice in Building 31R is the smell. Not decay. That would be expected. This is something else. Metallic, faintly electric. Like ozone after a lightning strike, mixed with something organic that doesn't belong to any taxonomy I learned in medical school. My name is Dr. Sarah Chen. For 32 years, I was a forensic pathologist at NASA's Ames Research Center in Mountain View, California. For 27 of those years, I worked in a facility that officially didn't exist. We called it the Exobiology Specimen Archive. The Pentagon called it Project Sigma. The four of us who had access called it what it was, the room where we kept the body. It arrived in December 1972, 3 months after I started at Ames. I was told it came from a recovery site in rural Idaho. A shepherd found it in a canyon after reports of unusual lights. No crash debris, no spacecraft fragments, just the specimen, partially buried in scree, desiccated but structurally intact. I was 29 years old. I'd never seen a dead body that made me question everything I thought I understood about biology. The specimen, we never called it a body in official documentation, measured 1.47 meters in length. Bipedal anatomy, bilateral symmetry. But that's where familiar morphology ended. The cranium was disproportionately large, roughly 40% of total body mass. The eyes, even collapsed post-mortem, suggested enormous orbital cavities adapted for low light conditions. The integument was a gray-beige, textured like dolphin skin, but with microscopic geometries that resembled neither scales nor hair. And the hands. God, the hands. 4 digits, each terminating in structures that seemed designed for both gross manipulation and precision work far beyond human capability. When we x-rayed them, we discovered a skeletal system unlike anything in terrestrial evolution, a lattice of what appeared to be ceramic-reinforced calcium compounds, organized in fractal patterns. For 50 years, we documented everything: tissue samples, chemical analyses, structural imaging. We published nothing. We told no one. We followed protocols written by people whose names I never learned, protocols that emphasized one principle above all others: preservation of social stability through controlled disclosure. Yesterday, those protocols were violated. Someone leaked the autopsy notes, and now I'm violating my clearance, my oath, and probably several federal laws to tell you what we actually found. Because after 5 decades of silence, I have realized something. The greatest threat to social stability isn't the truth. It's the lie we've been protecting. The first autopsy took place on January 8, 1973. We worked in a converted clean room in the sublevel of Building 31, accessed through a service elevator that required 3 separate biometric authentications. The team consisted of myself, Dr. Robert Voss, cellular biologist, Dr. Marcus Webb, radiologist, and Captain Elena Reyes, Air Force medical officer and our official liaison. Standard protocol would have been to begin with external examination, photography, measurements, but this wasn't standard anything. Dr. Voss established the documentation methodology we'd use for the next half-century. Describe everything in relation to terrestrial analogs. Note deviations, hypothesize function, avoid speculation about origin. We were scientists, not philosophers. Our job was to understand the mechanism, not the meaning. The specimen's skin was our first profound confusion. Under microscopy, the integument revealed a triple-layer structure, an outer membrane approximately 0.3 millimeter thick, a middle layer of what appeared to be chromatic cells, similar to cephalopod chromatophores, and a deep dermal layer containing vessels too small to serve any circulatory function we could identify. The texture varied across body regions, smooth on the cranium, almost scaled on the thorax, peculiarly ridged on the palms and soles. We collected samples using titanium scalpels. Carbon steel reacted with the tissue in unexpected ways, mild galvanic responses that suggested the integument maintained trace electrical potentials, even post-mortem. The cranium required a diamond-tipped saw. I remember the sound it made, not the mechanical whir of the blade, but something underneath it, a resonance. Dr. Webb joked that we were opening a bell. He stopped joking when we removed the calvarium. The brain, if that's the appropriate term, filled approximately 73% of the cranial cavity. The remaining space contained structures we still don't fully understand, geometric formations of crystalline material, arranged in patterns that resembled neither tumor nor natural calcification. We initially theorized they were pathological. 5 years of analysis suggested they were computational. The brain tissue itself defied preservation. Every fixative we tried, formalin, ethanol, glutaraldehyde, caused immediate structural collapse. We eventually developed a cryogenic suspension protocol, but even that couldn't prevent slow deterioration. By 1985, we'd lost approximately 30% of neural tissue to inevitable decay. What we salvaged revealed architecture beyond anything in terrestrial neurology. The cerebral cortex, again if we can call it that, showed folding patterns that maximized surface area far beyond human ratios. But more striking was the internal organization. Instead of gray and white matter differentiation, we found what Dr. Voss called striatal threading, neural pathways interwoven with the crystalline structures we'd found in the cranial cavity, creating what appeared to be hybrid biological mineral computational systems. Captain Reyes asked the question we were all thinking: how intelligent was it? Dr. Voss's answer was cautious. Intelligence is a spectrum. The spectrum might not overlap with ours. The thoracic cavity presented different mysteries. Where we expected lungs, we found a series of membranous sacs arranged in a radial pattern around a central structure that resembled neither a heart nor any pump mechanism from comparative anatomy. The sacs contained residual gas, mostly nitrogen and argon, with trace compounds we couldn't identify without mass spectrometry. The circulatory system, when we traced it with contrast dyes, followed patterns that seemed inefficient by mammalian standards. Extensive peripheral networks with minimal central pressure differential. Dr. Webb hypothesized a distributed pumping mechanism, perhaps dozens of microcontractile nodes rather than a single heart. We found no digestive tract in any conventional sense. What we did find, occupying the lower thorax and upper abdominal region, was a dense cluster of tubular structures, connecting to an organ that might have been metabolic, might have been something else entirely. The walls contained specialized cells with unusual mitochondrial density. Analysis suggested extremely efficient energy conversion, possibly extracting nutrition from compounds that would be toxic to terrestrial biochemistry. The reproductive system, if it had one, remained unidentified. No gonads, no analogous structures. Dr. Voss theorized asexual reproduction, or perhaps a life cycle stage we weren't witnessing. Captain Reyes noted that military intelligence had recovered no others, which suggested either extreme rarity or intentional solitude. The hands obsessed me. I spent hundreds of hours studying those hands. 4 digits, each containing 27 distinct bones, compared to our 27 for an entire hand. The joints allowed rotation in planes impossible for human anatomy. The fingertips contained dense neural tissue beneath the epidermis, suggesting tactile sensitivity orders of magnitude beyond ours. But it was the tool use markers that haunted me. The bone showed remodeling patterns consistent with repetitive precision tasks. The muscle attachment points suggested strength combined with extraordinary dexterity. These weren't hands that evolved to climb or fight. These were hands that built things, delicate things, complex things. In the 5th metacarpal of the right hand, we found something that changed everything. A microscopic implant, metallic, approximately 2 mikits in length. Composition, an alloy we couldn't replicate. Primarily titanium and niobium with trace elements that made no metallurgical sense. It was positioned precisely where a surgeon would place a medical device, embedded in a way that suggested intentional insertion, not injury. Dr. Voss wanted to extract it immediately. Captain Reyes made a phone call. 20 minutes later, 3 men in unmarked suits arrived and removed the specimen's entire right hand. We never saw it again. The documentation from that day includes a note in my handwriting. Technological intervention observed. Specimen was not merely intelligent. Specimen had access to manufactured materials and surgical procedures. Underneath, Captain Reyes added, classification elevated to cosmic top secret. No further discussion of implant permitted. That was February 1973. It would be 15 years before we found the second implant. By 1976, we'd established baseline biochemistry. The specimen's tissues contained proteins, lipids, nucleic acids, the fundamental chemistry of life as we understand it. But the details were profoundly wrong. The proteins used amino acids in configurations we'd never seen. The nucleic acids resembled DNA structurally but employed different base pairs. The cellular energy metabolism ran on compounds similar to ATP, but with molecular geometries that suggested optimization for different environmental conditions. Dr. Voss spent 3 years trying to sequence what he called the genome analog. The results were incomplete, but staggering. The genetic material, and we confirmed it was genetic, encoding information for protein synthesis, contained approximately 4.7 billion base pairs organized across structures resembling chromosomes. But where human DNA uses 4 nucleotide bases, this organism used 6. The implications were mathematically obvious: exponentially greater information density. Each gene could code for vastly more complex proteins. The regulatory networks could achieve sophistication we couldn't begin to model, but what stopped us cold was the non-coding sequences. In human DNA, roughly 98% doesn't directly code for proteins. Much of it is regulatory, structural, or evolutionary remnant. In the specimen's genome, the non-coding regions showed patterns, repetitive sequences that weren't random, mathematical structures embedded in biological information storage. Dr. Voss believed it was data compression. Others theorized it was redundancy for error correction. I wondered if it was something we didn't have conceptual frameworks to recognize. perhaps memory storage or computational processing, distributed across genetic material itself. We published none of this. Every finding went into classified reports, filed through Captain Reyes. The tissue chemistry revealed more impossibilities. Standard toxicology screening found heavy metal concentrations that should have been lethal. The liver analog contained mercury, cadmium, and lead at levels that would cause acute poisoning in any terrestrial organism. But the cellular structures showed no damage. In fact, the metal seemed integrated into normal metabolic processes. Dr. Maria Santos, who joined the project in 1978 as our biochemist, proposed that the specimen evolved in an environment with different background radiation and chemical composition. Perhaps a planet with heavy metal-rich geology, perhaps even different atmospheric chemistry. Or, she said during one late-night session, maybe their biology just solved problems we never needed to solve. The specimen's tolerance for environmental extremes became apparent through cellular studies. We subjected tissue samples to temperature ranges from 40 degrees Celsius to 60 degrees, minimal degradation. We exposed cells to radiation levels that would destroy human tissue. They showed damage, but also evidence of repair mechanisms far more robust than ours. We tested atmospheric compositions from pure nitrogen to high CO2 environments. The cells adapted, not survived, adapted. Even post-mortem, even after years of storage, the cellular machinery showed resilience that bordered on the uncanny. Dr. Santos described it as biological engineering optimized for uncertainty. The blood, if we can call it that, was another profound mystery. The circulatory fluid was copper-based, like hemocyanin in terrestrial arthropods, but with a molecular structure that suggested oxygen-carrying capacity superior to human hemoglobin. The fluid also contained suspended particles we initially thought were pathogens. They weren't. The particles were microscopic machines, organic metallic hybrids approximately 200 nanometers in diameter, each containing what appeared to be sensing mechanisms and minimal computational capability. We counted billions of them per milliliter. Dr. Santos called them cellular assistants. They appeared to perform immune functions, tissue repair, and possibly distributed information processing throughout the body. In essence, the specimen's blood was also a computational network. This was 1979. We wouldn't see similar concepts in human nanotechnology research for another 2 decades. The discovery that changed our entire framework came in 1988. Dr. James Park had joined as our molecular biologist. He was running routine analysis on preserved tissue samples when he noticed something in the mitochondrial analogs, the cellular structures responsible for energy production. The mitochondria contained a second implant, not mechanical, biological, a viral-like entity integrated into the mitochondrial genome, present in every cell we examined. But it wasn't pathological. It appeared functional, essential even, as if the organism's energy metabolism required this secondary genetic element to operate. Dr. Park spent months analyzing it. His conclusion was troubling. The viral element wasn't native to the specimen. The molecular evidence suggested it was engineered, deliberately inserted, possibly to enhance metabolic efficiency or adapt the organism to new environmental conditions. Someone had genetically modified this being. The question was who and when and for what purpose? Captain Reyes made another phone call. This time, 6 people arrived. They confiscated all of Dr. Park's research. They removed him from the project. We never saw him again. I learned years later that he'd been reassigned to a CDC facility in Atlanta, where he died in 1993 of what was officially called a cerebral aneurysm. He was 41 years old and had no history of vascular disease. The final biochemical revelation came from the specimen's eyes. The ocular tissue had degraded significantly by the 1990s, but what remained showed extraordinary specialization. The retinal analogs contained photoreceptor cells with pigments sensitive to wavelengths we can't see, deep infrared and near ultraviolet. The crystalline structures in the eye suggested compound optical systems, possibly allowing simultaneous focus at multiple depths or wavelengths. These eyes saw a different world than we do. Dr. Santos put it starkly. This organism perceived reality in ways we literally cannot imagine. Different light, different chemistry, possibly different time perception given the neural processing capacity. I remember standing in the lab at 2 a.m. staring at a slide of retinal tissue under the microscope, trying to imagine what those eyes had seen. What landscapes, what skies, what civilizations perhaps. Captain Reyes found me there. She said quietly, "The hardest part isn't what we've learned. It's what we'll never know." She was wrong. The hardest part was living with what we learned next. Block 3, the first contact evidence, 1,000 words. In 1994, we acquired new imaging technology, a prototype MRI system designed for materials analysis, capable of resolution far beyond medical-grade equipment. We rescanned the entire specimen. The cranial cavity revealed something we'd missed for 22 years. Embedded deep in the brainstem region, precisely where the medulla oblongata would be in human anatomy, we found a structure approximately 8 millimeter in diameter, dense, metallic, generating a faint electromagnetic signature even after decades of specimen death. It was organic interfaced. Neural tissue had grown into it, or it had grown into neural tissue. The integration was so complete we couldn't determine where biology ended and technology began. Dr. Voss called it the archive. We spent 6 months developing non-destructive protocols to analyze it. The structure appeared to be a data storage device of staggering density, molecular scale information encoding using principles we couldn't fully decipher. But we could detect patterns, rhythmic electromagnetic fluctuations, organized information structure. Something was stored in there. The question was whether we could access it without destroying it, and whether we should. The ethical debate consumed us. Dr. Santos argued it was potentially the specimen's memories, experiences, identity. Accessing it without consent was violation even if the subject was deceased. Dr. Voss countered that we had an obligation to understand, that knowledge served the greater good. Captain Reyes ended the discussion. This isn't our decision. The device was surgically extracted in November 1994 by a team we'd never met. They arrived with equipment we didn't recognize, worked for 6 hours, removed the structure intact, and departed. We were told it was being transferred to a facility better equipped for analysis. We never received results from that analysis. But 3 months later, Captain Reyes came to my office and closed the door. She looked older than her 56 years. "I'm going to tell you something I shouldn't," she said. "They accessed the archive. And it contained communication records, hundreds of them, exchanges between the specimen and others, not on Earth." The silence stretched. Finally, I asked, "When?" "The communications? Intermittent over a 40-year period, 1932 to 1972, the year before recovery." I felt something cold settle in my chest. The specimen was in contact with its home for 40 years, while living on Earth. "While living among us," Captain Reyes corrected. "The communications include observational data, detailed reports on human civilization, political systems, technological development, cultural practices, 40 years of field notes. It was studying us. It was documenting us." She paused. "Dr. Chen, the specimen didn't crash here. It was stationed here." The implications were too large to process. I managed. "Did the communications indicate why?" "That's classified beyond my clearance." She stood to leave, then stopped. "But I can tell you what wasn't in those communications. No distress calls, no request for extraction, no indication it wanted to leave. It chose to stay, or it was assigned to stay. Long-term observation, deep integration, and then something happened in 1972. The communication stopped. 6 weeks later, a shepherd found the body. After she left, I sat in the dark for 3 hours. An intelligence from elsewhere had lived on Earth for at least 4 decades, observing, recording, reporting home, and we only discovered it after it died. How many others might still be here? The next discovery came from reviewing old documentation. Our specimen arrived in December 1972, but the Ames facility had been receiving classified biological specimens since 1962. I'd assumed they were terrestrial, unusual fauna, perhaps test animals from radiation experiments, but there was a gap in the documentation. Specimens 03 through 07, no photos, no reports, just accession numbers and a note, transferred to White Sands Facility, 1965. I asked Captain Reyes about them. She looked at me for a long time. "You're asking if there were others. Were there?" "Yes." "Similar to ours?" "Similar, not identical. Different morphologies, different tissue chemistry. One was aquatic adapted. Another showed clear avian evolutionary markers." She hesitated. "All recovered between 1947 and 1961. All post-mortem at recovery." "How many total?" 17. "That we know of." 17 bodies, 17 visitors from elsewhere, all dead within a few decades of arrival. "What killed them?" I asked. "We don't know. Ours showed no signs of trauma, disease, or obvious cause of death. The autopsy was inconclusive. The others, similar findings. No clear etiology. Environmental incompatibility? Possibly. Or maybe they were old, or maybe Earth is toxic to them in ways we haven't identified. Or maybe..." She stopped. "Maybe what?" "Maybe they were killed." The thought had occurred to me. I'd avoided examining it too closely, but now it sat between us, unavoidable. "By whom?" I asked. "Us? The government?" "I don't know, but consider 17 bodies, all recovered in remote locations, all alone. No spacecraft, no technology except those implants. No indication of natural death. You think someone's hunting them? I think someone knows they're here, and I think that someone has the capability to find them. She pulled a file from her briefcase. Eyes only stamped across the cover. This is a summary of recovery circumstances. I'm violating every protocol showing you this, but you've dedicated 22 years to understanding one of these beings. You deserve context. The file contained brief descriptions of 17 recovery sites. Specimen 01, Socorro, New Mexico, 1947. Found by rancher, severe thermal damage. Specimen 04, Lake Superior Shoreline, 1952. Found by fishermen. Cause of death, unknown. Specimen 09, Cascade Mountains, 1958. Found by hikers, partially buried. Specimen 12, Louisiana Bayou, 1961. Found by hunters. Advanced decomposition. And ours, Specimen 14, Idaho Wilderness, 1972. Found by shepherd. Minimal decomposition despite apparent exposure. They're visiting us, I said. And they're dying here. Captain Reyes nodded. Or they're living here, and something's killing them. I became obsessed with the pattern. For 22 years, I'd focused exclusively on our specimen. Specimen 14, though I'd long since begun thinking of them as the observer. But now I saw them as part of something larger, a silent presence, a covert study of humanity spanning at least half a century. And someone had been finding them, one by one. I requested access to the other specimen files. Denied. I requested transfer to facilities where other specimens were housed. Denied. I requested communication with other research teams. Denied with a warning about compartmentalization protocols. So I became careful. I began correlating publicly available data with what I knew. UFO sighting databases, missing persons reports in remote areas, unusual animal death investigations, Forest Service incident reports. I looked for patterns, locations, time frames, environmental conditions. What I found disturbed me more than the initial discoveries. The 17 known recoveries clustered around specific geographic areas: the Pacific Northwest, the Southwest desert regions, the Great Lakes, the Appalachian Mountains. But more interestingly, each recovery site was within 200 miles of a major research installation or military base. Los Alamos, White Sands, Oak Ridge, Hanford, the Nevada test site. The observers, I had started thinking of all 17 that way, were watching our most sensitive facilities. Then I cross-referenced the recovery dates with historical events. Specimen 01, 1947, 2 months after the first atomic weapon test at Bikini Atoll. Specimen 04, 1952, during intensive H-bomb development. Specimen 09, 1958, the year of the largest atmospheric nuclear test series. Specimen 12, 1961, the height of Cold War tensions. Specimen 14, 1972, the year of the SALT I Treaty negotiations. They were monitoring our nuclear capability. Dr. Santos found me in the archive room at midnight, surrounded by maps and timeline charts. Sarah, what are you doing? They're watching us destroy ourselves, I said, or develop the capacity to. Every recovery correlates with nuclear weapons development or testing. That's a hell of a conclusion to draw from 17 data points. Is it? Think about it. An intelligence from elsewhere, capable of interstellar travel, stations long-term observers near every major nuclear facility. They're not here for our art or architecture. They're here because we're playing with extinction-level technology. And dying for it, Dr. Santos said quietly. 17 dead in 50 years. Not all at once, one every few years, scattered locations, different morphologies suggesting different homeworlds or genetic variations. I pointed to the map. But all in areas where they could monitor nuclear activity. So what killed them? That was the question I couldn't answer. The autopsy findings were maddeningly vague. No trauma, no disease, no toxin we could identify. Our specimen showed minor tissue degradation consistent with environmental stress, but nothing fatal. The heart analog had simply stopped. What if they're programmed? Dr. Santos suggested. Biological constructs designed for limited operational lifespan. You gather intel for 40 years, then you expire. Clean. No extraction needed. Biological drones? I considered it. The implants would support that. Built-in communication and data storage, genetically engineered for specific environments and missions. It would explain why we've never detected spacecraft or technology. They're delivered somehow, activated, and left to operate until biological termination. It was plausible. It was horrifying. It meant somewhere, someone was manufacturing living beings for espionage and disposal, but something didn't fit. The observer communicated for 40 years, I said. Those weren't automated reports. The exchanges showed decision-making, adaptation, possibly even emotional content. That's not a drone. Then what? A person, I said. Sent here, living among us, reporting home, dying alone. We sat with that for a long time. Finally, Doctor, Santos asked the question that had been haunting me. What if they're not all dead? The possibility had occurred to me. 17 recoveries over 50 years. But how many went unrecovered? How many died in places we'd never find them? How many were still operating? There's no way to know, I said. Actually, there might be. Dr. Santos pulled up a file I'd never seen. Captain Reyes isn't the only one bending rules. I've been corresponding with a researcher at Lawrence Livermore. They've been running electromagnetic anomaly detection around nuclear facilities for years. Standard security protocol. And they found repeating patterns. Low-frequency EM pulses. Intermittent. No clear source. No terrestrial explanation. Like the archive's signature? Exactly like it. I sent them our frequency analysis data anonymously. They confirmed it's a match. They're still out there, I breathed. Still watching. Still communicating. Or their technology is. The pulses could be from dead specimens we haven't found yet. Or from crashed equipment, or from living observers still conducting their mission. Dr. Santos closed the file. Sarah, I need to ask you something. If they're still here, still watching, do you think they're the threat? Or are we? I thought about our specimen, the observer, 4 decades of patient study, detailed documentation of human civilization, and then death in a remote canyon alone, their final communications sent to a home they'd never see again. I think, I said slowly, that something capable of crossing interstellar space to study us peacefully for 40 years isn't the threat. Then who killed them? Maybe nobody killed them. Maybe Earth killed them. Wrong atmosphere, wrong chemistry, wrong gravity. They're sacrificing themselves to watch us. That's even worse, Dr. Santos said. That means they think we're worth dying to understand. In 1996, I wrote a classified memo proposing we attempt to locate active observers using the EM signature data. The response was immediate and unambiguous. Request denied. Rationale: security protocols prohibit active search for potentially hostile intelligence assets. Further inquiry on this topic is prohibited under National Security Directive 47B. I was forbidden to look for them, which meant someone already was. By 1999, I'd been studying the observer for 27 years. I knew their anatomy better than my own. I could identify their tissue under a microscope in seconds. I'd spent more hours examining their body than I'd spent with any living person in my life. And I'd never asked the only question that mattered. Did they suffer? The question hit me during a routine tissue examination. I was looking at a sample of neural tissue, preserved, stained, mounted on a slide, when I noticed something I'd overlooked for nearly 3 decades. The neural architecture showed patterns consistent with chronic stress response. In terrestrial brains, prolonged stress creates measurable changes: dendritic pruning, altered neurotransmitter pathways, modified gene expression. I was seeing analogs of all of it, not acute trauma, chronic, long-term psychological stress. The observer had been unhappy. I ran back through decades of documentation with new eyes. The heavy metal accumulation I'd attributed to environmental adaptation. Could that have been slow poisoning? The mitochondrial inefficiencies I'd classified as species variation. Could those have been malnutrition? The tissue degradation I'd marked as post-mortem changes. How much had occurred pre-mortem? I realized with horror that I'd spent 27 years studying how they worked and never considered whether they were suffering. Dr. Santos found me crying in the lab. I've been treating them like a mechanism, I said. Like a puzzle. I documented their biology, but never considered their experience. Sarah, you did the job you were assigned. I dissected a person. The word felt right for the first time. A person who lived for 40 years in an environment that was killing them. They were in pain. They were isolated. They were dying slowly, and I've spent 3 decades cataloging the process without asking if we could have helped. We didn't know they existed until after death. But others might still be alive, right now, suffering the same slow decline, and we're forbidden from helping because of security protocols. Dr. Santos sat beside me. What do you want to do? I want to find them. The ones still alive. I want to offer help. That's treason. Is it? Is offering medical assistance to a dying person treason? When that person is an unidentified intelligence potentially gathering classified information about our nuclear capabilities? Yes, absolutely yes. She was right. I knew she was right. But I also knew that somewhere, perhaps in these mountains, perhaps in a desert or a forest or a remote canyon, another observer was dying alone, gasping in an atmosphere their lungs weren't designed for, poisoned by metals their metabolism couldn't process, isolated from their home by distances incomprehensible to human minds. And I had the knowledge to help them. The ethical singularity had arrived. My duty as a scientist, my oath as a physician, my obligation as a human being, all in direct conflict with my security clearance and national interest. I made my decision. I began assembling what I called the care package, a hypothetical medical intervention protocol for an extraterrestrial biology based on our specimen's chemistry. I documented atmospheric requirements, potential nutritional supplements, methods to reduce heavy metal toxicity, even psychological support frameworks for extreme isolation. I did it in my own time, on my own equipment, using unclassified resources. If questioned, I'd call it theoretical xenobiology research, academic exercise. But I designed it to be practical, actionable, helpful. Dr. Santos didn't try to stop me. Instead, she contributed biochemical support protocols, stress response mitigation, communication frameworks that didn't require verbal language. We never discussed what we do with it. In 2001, everything changed. Captain Reyes retired. Her replacement was Colonel Marcus Shaw, a career intelligence officer with no scientific background and absolute faith in protocol. Our first meeting was brief. "Your primary function is documentation and analysis," he said. "Not speculation, not theory, not ethical philosophy. You will examine the specimen, you will record findings, you will submit reports, nothing more. And if we discover something that could help whom? Dr. Chen, this specimen is a potential security threat. Every piece of information we extract protects American interests. Your job is extraction, not empathy." I realized then that the project had shifted. We were no longer trying to understand. We were mining intelligence from a corpse. I asked one question. "Colonel, do you think the observer was a person?" "I think it was a biological intelligence asset from an unknown origin conducting surveillance on United States strategic facilities. Whether it had personhood is irrelevant to our mission." That night, I copied every file I could access onto encrypted drives. 30 years of research, tissue analyses, biochemical profiles, imaging studies, my care protocols, everything. I buried the drives in a safety deposit box under a false name. If I was ever going to help a living observer, I'd need that information. And I had a feeling Colonel Shaw's version of the program wouldn't prioritize humanitarian intervention. The final ethical break came in 2003. Dr. Santos discovered something in archived tissue samples. Evidence of cellular regeneration patterns suggesting the observer had survived at least one severe injury during their time on Earth. Significant tissue damage to the lower thorax, fully healed, consistent with a puncture wound. Someone had stabbed them years before death, and they'd survived. "This changes the cause of death hypothesis," Dr. Santos said. "If they could heal from trauma, environmental stress alone probably didn't kill them." "What did?" She showed me the tissue around the healed wound. "Look at the cellular architecture. This isn't natural healing. This is surgical intervention. Stitches. Or the extraterrestrial equivalent." "They had help," I whispered. "Someone on Earth helped them recover from an injury." "Which means we're not the first humans to have contact? Someone else knew. Someone with medical knowledge and the willingness to help." I felt something like hope for the first time in years. Somewhere, at some point, a human had chosen compassion over protocol, had seen a suffering being and offered help, had recognized personhood across the vast gulf of biological difference. It could be done. It had been done. In 2005, I requested permission to present our findings at a closed scientific conference. Denied. I requested permission to publish a heavily redacted paper in a classified journal. Denied. I requested permission to consult with exobiologists at other institutions. Denied, with a formal reprimand for persistent disregard of compartmentalization protocols. Colonel Shaw called me into his office. "Dr. Chen, your work over 3 decades has been exemplary. Your documentation is meticulous. Your analysis is rigorous. But you seem to be forgetting the fundamental nature of this project." "Which is?" "Intelligence gathering. The specimen is a source of strategic information about a potential adversary. We study it to understand capabilities, weaknesses, and intentions, not to make friends with the next one we find." "Adversary?" "Colonel, the observer spent 40 years peacefully documenting our civilization. No sabotage, no attacks, no theft of technology. They watched and reported. That's not adversarial behavior. It's espionage. It's anthropology." The distinction hung between us. Finally, Colonel Shaw said, "Dr. Chen, I'm going to be direct with you. There are people in the intelligence community who believe the only reason we haven't seen overt contact is because they're planning something. 40 years of surveillance is reconnaissance. They're mapping us, learning our weaknesses, preparing. For what? Invasion, subjugation, resource extraction. Does it matter? The point is, we can't assume benevolence. We have to prepare for the worst case. Based on 0 evidence of hostile intent. Based on 17 bodies and no living ambassadors. Based on technology we can't replicate. Based on the fact that something capable of interstellar travel is watching our nuclear facilities." He leaned forward. Dr. Chen, the absence of attack is not evidence of friendship. It might just mean they're patient. I saw the worldview clearly then. To Colonel Shaw and those he represented, the universe was fundamentally hostile. Contact meant threat. Difference meant danger. The only rational response to the unknown was defensive preparation. It was also completely unfalsifiable. No evidence could disprove it, because the absence of evidence could always be reframed as sophisticated concealment. Colonel, I've spent 32 years studying the observer. Everything I've learned suggests a being of remarkable intelligence and profound patience. They endured conditions that were slowly killing them to complete their mission. That's not malice. That's dedication. Dedication to studying us, to cataloging our weaknesses, or to understanding us. Colonel, what if they're not planning invasion? What if they're trying to decide if we're worth saving? He stared at me. Saving from what? From ourselves. We've built enough nuclear weapons to render the planet uninhabitable. We're altering the climate. We're in perpetual conflict. Maybe they're not reconnaissance for invasion. Maybe they're reconnaissance for intervention. That's speculation. I know. But so is your invasion hypothesis. The difference is, mine explains their behavior better. 40 years of peaceful observation, no attempts to access classified facilities, no aggressive actions, just watching, documenting, waiting to see if we destroy ourselves or grow up. Colonel Shaw was quiet for a long moment. Then, Dr. Chen, I'm going to share something classified above your current clearance. I'm doing so because I think you need context. He pulled a file from his safe. In 1998, we detected an unidentified spacecraft in high orbit. It maintained position for 17 days, then departed. No communication, no aggression, just observation. You're telling me they're still watching. I'm telling you, we don't know what they're doing. But after that detection, funding for this program tripled. New facilities were built, new teams were assigned, because suddenly this wasn't about 17 dead bodies. This was about a civilization that can reach our planet at will. And you're treating that as a threat. I'm treating it as an unknown, and unknowns in national security are managed with caution, not optimism. He closed the file. Dr. Chen, I'm reassigning you. Effective immediately, you'll be transitioning to advisory role. Dr. William Foster will take over primary specimen analysis. You're removing me from the project. I'm recognizing that after 32 years, your perspective has become complicated. You've developed emotional attachment to the specimen, empathy for what you perceive as suffering. These are admirable human qualities. They're also compromising your scientific objectivity. I felt the anger rising. My emotional attachment hasn't prevented me from producing 3 decades of meticulous analysis. No, but it's led you to create unauthorized intervention protocols, to advocate for actively seeking living specimens, to question whether we should be studying them at all. He knew about the care package. Colonel, if we encounter a living observer, if we encounter one, it will be contained, studied, and managed according to protocols designed by people without emotional investment. Your protocols assume cooperation. They assume the specimen wants help. They assume we should provide it. Those are dangerous assumptions. They're compassionate assumptions. Dr. Chen, compassion is a luxury we can't afford when dealing with an intelligence that might be vastly superior to our own. Every bit of help we provide is information we give them. Every intervention is a vulnerability we expose. We can't save them without potentially endangering ourselves. I stood. Then we're not worthy of saving. Excuse me? If our response to encountering intelligent life is fear and exploitation, if we can't extend basic medical assistance without paranoia, then maybe we deserve whatever judgment they're preparing. Colonel Shaw's expression hardened. That kind of thinking is exactly why you're being reassigned. Dr. Foster will assume primary responsibilities tomorrow. You'll brief him on all relevant protocols. Classified materials will be transferred under my supervision. And my research, 32 years of work, remains classified, remains property of the United States government, remains locked in this facility. But not all of it, not the copies I'd hidden. I walked out of his office knowing my career on the project was over, and knowing that if I ever encountered a living observer, I'd help them. Protocol be damned. I spent my last week briefing Dr. Foster. He was younger than I'd been when I started. 32, brilliant, published. He approached the specimen with appropriate scientific detachment. He asked good questions. He understood the biology. But when I explained the evidence of chronic stress in the neural tissue, he shrugged. Interesting data point. Might indicate they're poorly adapted for long-term Earth deployment. Deployment, not residence, not survival. I realized the institutional perspective had fully shifted. The observer wasn't a person who'd lived and suffered and died. They were an asset, a technology platform, a source of extractable intelligence. On my final day, I requested 1 hour alone with the specimen. Colonel Shaw granted it, perhaps as a courtesy, perhaps because he thought I'd say goodbye and move on. I stood in the examination room where I'd spent thousands of hours. The specimen lay in the cryopreservation chamber, the same gray-beige skin I'd documented so meticulously, the large cranium, the delicate hands. I found myself speaking aloud. I don't know if you had a name. I don't know if your people use names, but I've thought of you as the observer for 27 years. It seemed respectful. You observed us. Now I've observed you. The absurdity of talking to a corpse wasn't lost on me, but I continued. I'm sorry I didn't understand sooner. I spent decades cataloging your biology and never considered your experience. You came here knowing it would be hard, probably knowing it might be fatal. And you stayed anyway. For 40 years, I pulled out a printout, one of the communication summaries Captain Reyes had shown me years ago. Your last transmission was 6 weeks before they found you. Do you know what it said? Just coordinates, weather data, atmospheric composition readings, nothing about distress, nothing requesting help. You died alone, and you didn't even ask to be saved. I felt the tears coming and didn't stop them. I don't know if you believed in anything, if your people have concepts like hope or purpose or meaning, but I believe you chose this, chose to witness us, chose to understand us, chose to document what we are, knowing we might never thank you for it. The preservation chamber hummed, the air system circulated, the fluorescent lights buzzed. They think you're a threat, or evidence of a threat. They've built entire security architectures around the fear of what you represent. But I think you were a gift. You gave us proof that we're not alone, that intelligence exists elsewhere, that someone thought we were worth studying. I placed my hand against the glass. I made something for you, for others like you who might still be here. Protocols that could help, interventions that might ease the suffering. I don't know if I'll ever have the chance to use them, but I made them because you deserved better than dying in a canyon alone. Dr. Chen. Colonel Shaw's voice from the doorway. Your time is up. I didn't turn. Did you ever wonder why they stay? If Earth is killing them slowly, why not leave? They're stranded, no extraction capability. Or they choose to stay. Choose to complete the mission even at cost to themselves. That's not enemy behavior, Colonel. That's dedication, nobility even. Noble spies are still spies. And dead witnesses are still witnesses. I finally turned to face him. The observer witnessed 40 years of human history. They saw us at our best and worst. And they kept watching, kept documenting. That means something. It means we're being evaluated. Maybe. Or maybe they're just trying to understand, to know us before they reveal themselves. To be certain we won't destroy them like we destroy everything else we fear. Colonel Shaw stepped into the room. Dr. Chen, you're romanticizing an intelligence operation. And you're militarizing a cultural exchange. I grabbed my briefcase. But it doesn't matter now. I'm done. Dr. Foster can carry on the extraction, the documentation, the reduction of a person to data points. That person is dead. Yes, but others aren't. And when you find them, and you will find them because you're looking now, I hope you remember that they're people, frightened, alone, dying in an environment their bodies weren't meant for. And I hope someone chooses compassion over protocol. That's not your decision to make. No, but it was mine to prepare for. I walked past him, past the security checkpoints, past the 3 decades of my life invested in understanding the observer. In my car, I allowed myself to fully grieve, not just for the observer, for all 17, for the ones still alive, still suffering, still watching us from their hidden places, for the profound loneliness of being the only one of your kind on an alien world, for the courage it took to stay anyway, and for the tragedy that humanity's first response to encountering them was fear. I drove to the bank, retrieved the encrypted drives, took them home. That night, I drafted a document, not for publication, not for official channels, for the future, for the moment when we finally acknowledge what I'd known for 3 decades. We are being watched. We are being studied. We are being given the chance to prove ourselves worthy of contact. And so far, we're failing. The document contained everything: the biological data, the communication evidence, the ethical arguments, the care protocols. I titled it The Observer Testimony, a 32-year study in first contact and institutional failure. I sealed it with instructions to be opened only if A, official contact is established, B, living specimens are publicly acknowledged, or C, I am deceased, and these materials become relevant to ongoing research. I gave copies to 3 people I trusted: Dr. Santos, a lawyer, and a journalist. Then I waited. For 17 years I waited. Yesterday, someone leaked the autopsy notes. Today I'm releasing the rest, because the observer deserves their story told. And because somewhere out there, others are still watching, still hoping we'll be better than we've shown, still waiting for us to choose understanding over fear. The leaked autopsy notes went viral in 48 hours. Overnight, the world learned what a handful of us had known for 50 years. We are not alone. We have never been alone. And we've been dissecting the evidence in secret government facilities for half a century. The public reaction exceeded every doomsday scenario the intelligence community had wargamed. There was panic, yes. Religious upheaval, certainly. Economic disruption, absolutely. But there was also something the paranoid security apparatus never anticipated: compassion. Within days, grassroots organizations formed demanding humane treatment of any living extraterrestrial beings. Vigils were held for the 17 known dead. Religious leaders across traditions offered prayers for the observer's soul, or its equivalent. The most viral image was a photograph I'd taken in 1989, a close-up of the observer's hand, those 4 elegant digits with their impossible joint articulation. Someone overlaid text. This hand reached across the stars. We responded with autopsy saws. It became the symbol of everything we'd done wrong. The government's response was predictable: denial, classification review, damage control. But the autopsy notes were too detailed, too technical, too specific to dismiss as hoax. Independent scientists confirmed that the biological descriptions didn't match any known terrestrial organism. On day 3, a former Lawrence Livermore researcher came forward with the electromagnetic anomaly data. "They're still out there," he told CNN. "We've been detecting their signals for years, and we've been hiding it." On day 5, Dr. Santos released our care protocols. "If you're reading this," her statement began, "you might be an observer. You might be frightened. You might be suffering. You might be dying in an environment your body wasn't designed for. I want you to know, some of us understand, some of us want to help, and now the information is public. Anyone with medical knowledge can offer assistance." The protocols went viral among medical professionals. Translation efforts began immediately, converting our recommendations into visual guides, universal symbols, diagrams that didn't require verbal language. Someone created a website, helptheobservers.org. It contained the care protocols, safe contact guidelines, and a message in every human language. "We know you're here. We know you're watching. We want to help. Please trust us." Whether any observer would see it, whether any would trust it, remained unknown. But we were trying. On day 8, Colonel Shaw appeared before a congressional committee. I watched on television as senators demanded answers. "For 50 years, you've hidden the existence of extraterrestrial intelligence from the American people," Senator Morrison said. "Why?" Colonel Shaw's response was everything I expected: to prevent panic, to maintain social stability, to protect national security in the face of an unknown potential threat. Unknown? You studied them for 50 years. What's unknown? Their intentions, their capabilities, their long-term objectives. Colonel Shaw, did any of the 17 recovered specimens ever commit a hostile act? Not to our knowledge. Did they attempt to access classified facilities? No. Did they attempt to steal technology? No. Did they make any aggressive moves toward human populations? No. Then on what basis did you classify them as threats? Colonel Shaw hesitated. The mere presence of unidentified intelligence conducting surveillance is exactly what we've done to them for 50 years. We surveilled them. We dissected them. We imprisoned their bodies in secret labs, and they never fought back, never retaliated, never threatened us. Senator Morrison leaned forward. "Colonel, perhaps the real threat was our response to them." The exchange went viral within the hour. By day 10, the political pressure was insurmountable. The president announced the formation of an independent scientific commission to review all extraterrestrial contact evidence and develop ethical protocols for future encounters. Dr. Santos was appointed to it. So was I. Our first meeting was surreal. 50 scientists, ethicists, linguists, and philosophers assembled to answer the question, how should humanity respond to the presence of extraterrestrial observers? The debate was intense. Some argued for active search and outreach. Others advocated for passive observation. Let them approach us. A few maintained we should treat them as security threats until proven otherwise. I presented the observer's story: 40 years of peaceful documentation, evidence of chronic suffering, death in isolation, no aggressive action ever taken, and the profound courage required to stay despite the cost. They didn't come as conquerors, I concluded. They came as students, anthropologists, witnesses, and we dissected them for it. The room was silent. Finally, Dr. Kenji Yamamoto, an ethicist from Tokyo, spoke. "Perhaps the question isn't how to respond to their presence. Perhaps it's how to become worthy of it." That became our framework. Not security protocols, not containment strategies, not defense architectures, worthiness protocols. How do we demonstrate that humanity can be trusted with contact? How do we prove we've moved beyond fear-based responses? How do we show that we can meet intelligence with intelligence, difference with curiosity, and the unknown with open hands? It's been 3 weeks since the leak. We don't know if living observers are still on Earth. We don't know if they've been watching the global response. We don't know if they'll ever trust us enough to make contact. But we're trying to be better. Medical facilities worldwide have implemented the care protocols. Search teams trained in non-threatening contact procedures are being organized. Communication frameworks that don't assume human language or sensory experience are being developed. And perhaps, most importantly, we're talking about it. Humanity is having the conversation we should have had 50 years ago. What does it mean to encounter the other? How do we respond to intelligence that challenges our cosmic loneliness? Can we move past fear to understanding? The Observer spent 40 years watching us, documenting our triumphs and atrocities, our brilliance and stupidity, our capacity for both connection and destruction. They died before seeing what we do with their sacrifice. But I have to believe, that somewhere another observer is watching now, watching us grapple with the revelation, watching us struggle towards something better, watching us try, however imperfectly, to be worthy of the gift they've given us, the knowledge that we are not alone, that we have been seen, that someone thought we were worth understanding. Last night, I returned to the facility where the observer's body remains. New protocols are in effect now. The preservation chamber has been moved to a memorial room, open to scientists worldwide. Respectful, dignified, a body finally treated as a person. I stood before them one final time. "The world knows now," I said softly. "Your story is told, and we're trying to be better, trying to honor what you gave us, trying to deserve the patience you showed." The chamber hummed, the same sound I'd heard for 32 years. But it felt different now. Not the sound of scientific equipment, but something like a vigil. A witness for the witness. In my pocket, I carried a letter, written by a 7-year-old girl from Oregon, delivered to our commission yesterday. It said, "Dear space friend, I'm sorry we were scared of you. I'm sorry we hurt you. If you're still here, I hope you know some of us think you're brave. Thank you for watching us. We'll try to be good. Love, Emma." It's been uploaded with millions of others to a database the commission maintains. Messages to the observers, apologies, thanks, invitations, hope. Maybe they'll never be read. Or maybe, somewhere in the forests of the Pacific Northwest, in the canyons of the Southwest, in the remote corners of our planet, an observer is accessing our internet, reading our messages, watching our slow, stumbling attempt at redemption, and maybe, just maybe, deciding we're worth another chance. I left the letter by the preservation chamber. Outside, the California sun was setting. The sky was orange and purple and beautiful. The same sky the observer had watched for 40 years. The same stars that held their home. "Still here," I whispered. "Still watching. Still hoping we'll be better." And somewhere, in the silence between stars, perhaps someone was listening.